The key takeaway here is that a lot of these ideas are nothing new. People parse and learn in different ways. People hang out in different places on the internet. And now with AI coming in, it's more and more critical to speak to different audience and learning types. And I think it is helpful for marketing teams out there to think multimodally, to create content in different forms and formats, and to honor that, but at the same time, always staying true to the core story and pain point that their brand is trying to solve. I'm Irina Papuc, and this is SEO in 2026.
Irina, what's your number one SEO tip for 2026?
Absolutely. My number one tip is think multimodally. A consistent trend that we've seen slowly grow over time is the inclusion of different types of media and search results. AI can already parse images and videos really well, and it can also explain in detail what's depicted. By thinking multimodally, you will increasingly capitalize on this as AI increasingly chunks related concepts across formats into a tailored presentation for the user. So TLDR, think multimodally.
Think multimodally. And just to summarize multimodally, are we talking about video, audio, images, text? Anything else I'm missing here?
Infographics, diagrams, also the way you think through what kinds of content and visuals to use, like avoiding stock images, fillers, no longer publishing walls of text. I would say that covers the main stuff.
Interesting. Avoiding stock images. So there's an industry gone.
Sorry, industry.
I presume that we're okay using AI generated images if they're relatively well. Are they original images then if they're generated by AI?
I would say in general, provided that you, again, do things according to best practice and ethics here, which is citing your source, I think you can definitely use AI-generated content. Google has explicitly said in its best practices that AI-generated content, whether it's visual or written, is okay to use on your site or elsewhere. So that's not an issue at its principle. But what is an issue is going to be just properly citing whatever it is that you put out there so that you don't accidentally deceive your audience.
So when you advise to enrich blog articles with infographics, diagrams, videos, elements like that, are you saying incorporate as much as you can, incorporate all different elements as part of one blog article, or is it just depending on what is relevant for the particular piece and perhaps just pick one of them if appropriate?
I think in general, there's no hard or fast rule here. I think it's very much about speaking to your unique audience's pain points and needs. If you've heard me in past podcasts, I'm always rattling this as our true north. It's always about being as helpful as you can with what you put out there. But also to expand a little more on this point, I think it's important to always enrich blog content with meaningful visuals and videos. I think that's really essential to AI-driven search because AI increasingly interprets and surfaces content across multiple media formats. And I also think that even before AI came around, stock images and walls of text were never really helpful for humans. So it's not really a new policy or rule here. I also think that, again, just being mindful of what your audience really finds helpful is key. That is the true north. And if that's going to mean diagrams, infographics, explainer videos, then definitely seek to create a diverse portfolio of ways you communicate your story to your audience.
So when you say that walls of text were never particularly helpful for humans, how much volume is a wall of text?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say at this point, anything going beyond, honestly, 1,000 words, I would be wary about. But honestly, it depends again on what industry you're talking about. You know, if you're talking about beauty and health and wellness or more, visually focused, I would say markets, that number might dwindle even more. If you're speaking about highly technical markets like aerospace industry or something of that nature, then those wall of text might be more relevant. So again, there's no hard or fast rule here. It really depends on the ecosystem your brand is in.
Interesting, because perhaps 5 years ago, it would have been good practice to have a pillar article of maybe 5,000 words and a very comprehensive piece that incorporated everything that you could imagine on a particular subject. But is that not best practice anymore?
Honestly, I think there are still places where pillar articles that are almost read like a short book is still helpful, and there are certainly audiences that will find that useful. But nowadays, just because of the way we're seeing AI parse information, I think it's going to be more about increasing engagement, comprehension, and that's why a multi-format way of approaching content is going to be more helpful. I don't know if those really long form pillar posts were even, after all, that useful, to be honest, just because the average reader's attention span is only getting smaller over time. So I think it's helpful, even back then when we were preaching that, to consider more ways of communicating to people, more ways that they might be able to digest that information. It's kind of like going back to school, right? Where we were often taught that there are different ways of processing and absorbing knowledge. There are visual learners, there are more like audio learners, there are learners who are more focused on taking in text. That's still a case. Not all of us parse info the same way. So I think thinking about it that way, whether there's AI or not, is certainly helpful to get to the largest number of people out there who are interested in what you have to say.
So you're also a fan of structuring content in a modular fashion so that each section can be pulled independently for an answer box or summary, useful for AI. Are you saying that AI would struggle to use content from a pillar article of 5,000 words, even if it was structured in an optimum way for AI?
Yes, I think that's my take right now. TLDR, as we see just this whole industry grow more. But right now, here's my take. I think that modular content is crucial because AI will increasingly extract independent sections for snippets, voice assistants, multimodal presentations. I think each section should have a clear heading, summary, and optional bullets, if possible. For example, a B2B SaaS white paper can still be split into independent case studies, metrics, featured benefits. So just making it easier for AI to parse this and extract just what it needs for that particular answer, I think it's going to be just serving you better in the long term.
How do you know that your content is optimally produced for AI? Is there some kind of software that you can use or AI that you can use to actually test and review whether or not you can enhance and improve what you have already?
It's a great question. While we don't have nearly as clear of a visual on this as we would with traditional SEO with Google Analytics, there's a lot of little things we can look at to get a better sense of what's going on. For example, you can religiously track your featured snippet appearances by having a list of important keywords to you and just regularly checking in to see what your presence looks like there. You can still do the age-old things of looking at bounce rate, conversions, engagement metrics, all available in Google Analytics. Really quick, I think there's another thing that might be helpful here, which is just looking at cross-platform engagement, conversions, just having somebody on your team, yourself perhaps, look at the AI-generated answers that are most relevant to what people might be searching to get to your business. While there's not analytics for that yet, I think you can still sort of hack this yourself by just staying on the pulse of what pops up in questions relevant to your own discovery, to your own brand's discovery.
Do you also say to expect user modeling to expand? What do you mean by that?
Sure. So really briefly, Google has long been able to personalize search results based on user behavior and interests, and that now expands to AI platforms. So I do believe that this is more of a hunch, not a solid thing yet that's happening. But I do predict that in 2026, AI platforms will likely tailor our generated answers to the type of media the user prefers to interact with. Do you want me to expand a little more on that thought, if that's helpful?
Yeah, sure. Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. So, basically personalized search is becoming more sophisticated. Media preferences are still more of a prediction than an actual current thing. But I think it's worth bringing this up in our convo since this is, after all, SEO in 2026, because I think that we're likely going to see AI considering behavior, media preferences, and interests more closely. Users, for example, who might prefer video over walls of text may end up seeing more tutorials served up to them. Users who prefer text may see more detailed guides served up to them. B2C brands can offer really short-form videos, interactive content, social snippets. So there's a lot of I guess, opportunity here to, again, consider the way in which different members of your audience might take in information. And that's why it always brings me back to this multimodal approach. So yeah, that's my thought on that.
I guess it's leading us almost in the direction of personalized AI generated content for different users. Perhaps 2 or 3 years down the line, but it certainly leads us to a situation where every user has a relatively unique experience, and it's difficult to envision and plan for the impact that your content is going to have, because not everyone's going to have the same experience. So how do you possibly plan and determine the likely impact of a piece of content if you don't know who it's going to go in front of?
That is an incredibly important question. And it's probably you've nailed it, right? That's one of the biggest things we have to crunch on and think about as SEOs. And I think there it's about like taking time as a business leader, again, to figure out what is the core essence of what you're trying to tell your audience, independent of how you serve it up, in what format and style. First, just sit down with your team or by yourself as a business leader and tell the story of your brand. Go back to what are the pain points of your would-be customers. It always come back to you helping them on their hero's journey as a guide, right? You, the SEO marketer, are not the hero. It is your customer who is the hero, and you are here to make life a little bit easier for them. So go back to the absolute bare essentials and figure out what are the pain points you are trying to solve by being genuinely helpful. Once you've got this nailed down, then I would say take these concepts to your marketing communications team and encourage them to spin them up in different formats: video, text, diagrams, infographics, whatever it might mean. This will largely depend on what space your company's in, right? B2B SaaS audience is used to getting served up content in a different way than a beauty and wellness product. So some of those things have not changed, and people still expect certain ways of parsing info from certain places. But I think alongside these older strategies, it will be helpful to have your marketing team take those core ideas you've come up with, like the true north of your story, of your brand, and create different ways for people to parse them. All these things we've already talked about in our convo. And then just make sure your analytics guys stay on top of analytics for each of them, whatever is available at this time. And I think there will be more tools rolling out. They have to in the next year to be able to track and measure things even better from AI search. So that's my hot take, David.
How do you know where to publish your content, though? Because you want to publish in as many different places as possible, potentially, but you don't want to have... Is duplicate content still an issue? If AI likes your content, are they happy taking your content from different places? Or, should you just be publishing one unique piece of content in one place? And how do you choose, if that's the case, whether you publish on your website or somewhere else?
I would say duplicate content is still very much an issue, and we do not want to flood the internet with billions of iterations of the same thought. That is precisely what Google is trying to clean up. And common sense would say that AI also does not want to be fed 1,000 iterations of the same idea from 1,000 different places. So my advice there would be, if you're going to tell a similar story on multiple platforms or channels, stick to making it as unique and as helpful, as tailored as you can. Maybe there's a core idea there, but make sure that your team always asks themselves, is this adding anything new to the conversation that is meaningful and helpful? I think that true north is still there, and I really think it would be in everyone's best interest to avoid duplicate content.
Irina, what's the key takeaway from the tip you shared today?
The key takeaway here is that a lot of these ideas are nothing new. People parse and learn in different ways. People hang out in different places on the internet. And now with AI coming in, it's more and more critical to speak to different audience and learning types. And I think it is helpful for marketing teams out there to think multimodally, to create content in different forms and formats, and to honor that, but at the same time, always staying true to the core story and pain point that their brand is trying to solve.
Irina Papuc is co-founder at Galactic Fed. Find out more over at galacticfed.com. Irina, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2026.
Thank you so much for having me, David. Always an honor.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2026, the book, over at seoin2026.com.